And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. And indeed, it's another Monday morning. And generally, the fallout from the Sir John revelations in his will has sparked a massive conversation about anti-corruption and the need to fight it. We've had conversations around the need to review the asset declaration laws. But in the midst of that conversation, another conversation has emerged about what we do with our anti-corruption agencies. I'm talking about the Shraj, I'm talking about IOCO, I'm talking about the Auditor General, but more specifically, the Office of the Special Prosecutor. And it's a special case there because as we've seen the last couple of weeks, the Special Prosecutor has swung into action on a host of issues, one of which mainly is the Sir John matter. He's frozen his assets, the assets that were in the will, and has also announced that he was going to look into this. And so there's a lot of work that he's doing there. But the question that keeps coming up, and it came up last week very strongly, is does he have the resources to do the job? While we are asking that, we want to broaden the scope a bit more to look also at the other agencies, because it has to be a coordinated fight as far as corruption is concerned. And so let's get into the specifics as we know it. We know that the OSP has a very unique challenge that he's facing right now. It is one of those key agencies set up by this administration the first term to deal with corruption. It was a campaign promise that was fulfilled. 9 months since the new year, SP, we have a challenge now with the board. It has no governing board. The new SP has been sworn in and it has no governing board. Now the challenge with this is, without a governing board, there are few things that you are unable to do, okay? So this is apart from the resource question. It also comes to the function, the ability to work as an effective organization, right? Function of the governing board, as we see here, ensure proper and effective performance of the functions of the office, advise the special prosecutor on the recruitment and selection of various staff among other duties. And so this is key, right? You need a board to help do all this, right? And this is a new special prosecutor who will require this board in place to make sure this indeed happens. And if you look at the composition of the board, you have the special prosecutor himself, and we have the deputy special prosecutor, a nominee minister of national security, one person who is a female representing the anti-corruption civil society organizations. And so if you go back to the previous board, you had the Ghana Integrity Initiatives head, who is a female on this, right? Linda Kwafo was representing, was occupying this particular position on the OSP board. You have the audit service as a rep there. You have the Ghana Police Service. You have IOCO. The Financial Intelligence Center, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice on there as well. And so you see that the various institutions are all represented on this board. And yet, we don't seem to have this board working. In fact, we don't have a board at all, hasn't been sworn in yet. And so you begin to see how there's a reason why these agencies were selected, to have reps there, because the SP would need police to work, would need the audit service to work, you will need IOCO to work. They will need Financial Intelligence Center, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice. These reps will help the SP work. Without them, you begin to see the challenges that the SP is going to begin to face. So that's a key thing. Now, then we come to the issue of funding. In the 2022 budget, we found that the budget allocation that was given to the OSP is 170 million cedis. Now, we've checked, right? And we have found that, well, this is June I'm talking about. We're in June. Out of the 170 million that was allocated for the Office of the Special Prosecutor in the budget, only 10 million cedis has been released to the Special Prosecutor to work. You begin to see the picture. 170, 10 million, woefully inadequate, obviously. And we're beginning to see, voices from the SP itself making the point about how this is crippling the ability to work. So the matter even becomes even more alarming if you consider what the OSP himself had estimated he actually required to fully function. Remember that this is a relatively new agency. It's not been there as long as SHRAJ, as long as the Auditor General, as long as EOCO. It's relatively new. So the setup itself is an issue, right? And the OSP is still in its formative stage, right? It needs a place that is properly equipped. It needs to recruit. And so the OSP had requested 1 billion cedis. And I've heard people say, 1 billion cedis, really? What are you going to do with 1 billion cedis? They have to recruit. They need the sales. I'll break it down for you shortly. They asked 1 billion. They got 170 million cedis. That is 17% of what he asked for. Right? 70% of what he asked for. Even the 17%, he only gets 10 million out of that. And those are facts. Facts. And it's in the budget, as we know. So why the 1 billion is a question that has been asked. And we've been getting some clarity on this. Setting up the office is one. Building a cyber security and forensic lab is another. Build cells to keep suspects is another key issue that the OSP wanted the billion for. And purchasing other logistics. So you want a fully functional OSP so it can work fully. That's what they needed the billion cedis for. And then we decided to track since it was established. What has happened? The first time in 2018, they got 3.8 million cedis. So that was very small. And remember that Martin Amidu was there. Now, in 2019, there was a significant increase from 3.8 million to 180.2 million cedis. So that was a lot. And then from then, in 2020, it dipped, right? You can say COVID, everything was affected. So from 180 to 138 million. And then it went down even further in 2021 to $124 million. And then there is a jump. So since it was established, this year is the second highest year in terms of budget allocation. This year. The first highest is 2019. The second is this year. So budget allocation dipped for 2 years, of course, from a low of just 3.8 million, and it's climbed up again. But we're in the middle of the year. Only 10 million of this has been released. And so that's a problem. So when will the rest be released with 6 months to go is a key question to ask. And then we said, okay, let's expand this a bit more to the other agencies as far as anti-corruption is concerned. And then you have SHRAJ, right? If you look at the 2021, SHRAJ received what, 45 million? That's if you compare that to what the OSP is getting, that begins to paint a picture. 45 million cedis for SHRAJ. And then in 2022, they had 60 million. So that's an increase, right? That's an increase of some, 15 million cedis for SHRAJ. If you look at the audit service, that's a significant amount of money, far, far more than both the OSP and SHRAJ combined. And this is according to the budget of 2021 and 2022. Now, I must put a caveat here. This is what the budget says. The question we need to ask ourselves is, although budget says 45 and 60, how much of this was actually released is a key question that we need to get to. Because if you look at the audit service, 481 million cedis sounds a lot in comparison to what we told you about the Office of the Special Prosecutor. But how much of this was released in 2021? You look at the 2022 audit service, again, big amount of money, 536. That's 500 million cedis released to the audit service, more than 500 million in 2022. But the key question again, how much of this was actually released or has been released as of yet to the audit service? So you begin to see that there are questions to ask the government. Is it because of lack of money? Okay, but prioritizing, what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing the fight against anti-corruption? Because then somebody argue that you spend 500 million cedis, but audit service can save you billions and billions of cedis. If you read the Imani's report on the financial recklessness, some of the auditing challenges that are not spotted in time, that was one of their recommendations. If you spot them in time, you equip them, they will be saving government a lot of money. Auditor General's report tells us that too. So if you equip them, the argument is the economic benefit of providing them with the resources. This is very sound. So, but government has other needs, right? We're going to get into that. It's a big conversation. My guests are joining me via Zoom. We have Joseph Whittal, who is the head of STRAD, joining us for a conversation. Thank you, Mr. Whittal, for your time. I'm grateful that you are joining me, Mr. Whittal. Grateful to have you. You see the head of the Audit Service, Internal Audit Agency, also joining me, Dr. Odrosai. I'm grateful, sir. And I'll come back to the numbers. In fact, I'll start with the numbers because all of you are there. So I want to get a picture first. This is what the budget told us. What did you actually receive? Mary is a good friend of ours, a friend of the show, also joining us for a conversation. Her former boss was on the OSP board. So maybe she can give us an insight into how the office is faring now. After the break, the conversation will get underway and we'll get some of the details. Stay with me. So my guest joining me, as you know already, Dr. Eric Odrosai is a Director General of the Internal Audit Agency. Joseph Whittal is the Commissioner for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. Mary Ada is a Programs Manager at the Ghana Integrity Initiative. In fact, I need to update on the OSP's budget. I understand that 6 million has been released, but that is yet to hit the account. So to be more precise from the sources, this is so in June, out of the 170, 6 million has been released, not 10 million in effect, and that they are waiting for all that to hit the account. And 1 billion, as I explained, is what they had requested, because remember that it is one-time expenditure to set up the office completely. You know, have the cells, have cybersecurity, recruit, etc. That's not something you spend every year. But once you set it up with a 1 billion, then the rest, of course, will become recurrent expenditure. So that's where we are with the OSP. I want to bring in Mr. Joseph Whittal very quickly. Mr. Whittal, I mean, we looked through the budget and the figures, what I put forward is what we found as what was allocated to you, some 60 million cedis for this year. But I need to always clarify, because we know there's always sometimes a discrepancy between what is stated in the budget and what you actually get. So clarify for me where you are in June in terms of what was said in the budget and what you actually have.
Well, thank you, Evans. Let me first of all indicate that we are older.
Okay.
We've been around for some time, and so we've accumulated a number of staff. The Commission currently has about close to 900 staff, and I believe by end of June, when we would have put the extra staff that we are recruiting currently on board, will be about 1,084. So much of that figure that you are looking at is on compensation. And so compensation is not what really brings service to the people. It's about paying staff. What we need to look at and to unpack is what goes into goods and service, what goes into CAPEX. And as at now, when I check the figures, we don't have up to 2 million for the year for goods and service. We have a very paltry sum for CAPEX, and it's not even released yet. So that is the situation that we find ourselves. And so it's good you are throwing the searchlight on all of us, and not we have been quiet because we've been singing this song over the years. So it's good the OSP has come, and in the process of understanding the problems affecting anti-corruption agencies, you would appreciate the plight all of us have. So that is the situation. Okay. Much of that figure of the 45 million for this quarter, first and second quarter, the compensation is 9 million. Goods and services roughly 2 million, and CAPEX 0.
Wow. I'm gonna be coming back to get more on this, but I want to quickly bring your colleague from the Internal Audit Agency, Dr. Drosai. Dr. Drosai, I saw the audit service there, and you seem to have a substantial amount of allocations. I don't know whether that is the same as the audit agency, but is it the same with your agency, or the story is different?
Thank you very much. The story is different.
Okay.
The story is different because I am laughing because it looks as if all the other agencies are getting more than what the Internal Audit Agency is getting. We should also understand that the Internal Audit Agency's budget, that is our goods and services and our compensation, increased by 1 million cedis over that of 2021. So in 2020, our budget was 6.9 million. That is CAPEX, excluding CAPEX, sorry, compensation and goods and services. In 2022, that figure was increased by 1 million. So we had 7.9 as budget for compensation and goods and services, excluding CAPEX, because the nature of our CAPEX is such that it is allocated in between the year. As we speak now, we have our first quarter and second quarter releases. Like Mr. Whittal, Commissioner Whittal said, the compensation budget is released on time because that is the salaries and emolument of staff. So that is not negotiable. The challenge here would normally be the goods and services. But for us at Internal Audit Agency, we have received our first quarter and second quarter goods and services. So we are running. But that is not to say that all is well with the Internal Audit Agency, because the agency, as a corruption preventing institution, at the moment is not in its own office premises. The agency has never had its own office since the agency was established. The agency has actually moved offices 5 times since it was established. At the moment, the agency is housed at the 5th floor of Ghana House, the former GNTC building. And even on the 5th floor, we are occupying part of the 5th floor. That is the kind of challenge we have. But can you blame anybody? We cannot blame anybody because the legislation or the law supporting internal audits in this country itself is obsolete. So we have initiated a process to review the law. And I believe that once the law is reviewed or amended or repealed, and if we have all internal auditors coming under a new internal audit service, maybe this circumstance or this situation would be resolved. But I must say that if we were to even have 20% of what the OSP has now, and we're even to have the imposing building that the OSP has now, I can tell you that Internal Audit Agency, working through the network of internal auditors across this country, would be able to prevent a lot of corrupt activities before it even happens. So that is the situation.
And you make a very important point. Unlike Shraj, OSP, EOCO, yours is prevention. So that's a very important point. I'll come to some of the details shortly, but I want to go back to Mr. Whittal. Mr. Whittal, so I'm curious. We are in June. You have received next to nothing really for your actual operations, apart from salary. So how are you functioning? How are you able to do your job then? How have you managed to do your job in the last 6 months?
Well, Evans, actually, it's not next to nothing. It's about 2 million. And what we've done is to send the money to the regions, for the regions to operate whilst we wait on maybe third quarter, and that may bring something meaningful. And on top of that, because, government is a continuum. So we have made some expenditures last year that were not met because fourth quarter was not released. And so we have creditors who are on our neck. They want to be paid. And so when they come, when third quarter comes, I'm believing that we may have to pay them. And the rest will then be what we will be using to do the work for the commission. And that is why we keep insisting, especially in our case, our law prevents us from having internally generated revenue. We are supposed to be the ordinary person's go-to institution who cannot go to court to have issues of disputes resolved for human rights, for ombudsman, and for the anti-corruption. And so if you do this to this institution, which the framers of the Constitution actually wanted to take care of the ordinary person who cannot access any other service which is paid for, then you're really hitting at the belly button of the vulnerable. And that is why we've been insisting that it doesn't take much to make this institution work. It doesn't take much. How much does it take? If you look at the type of figures, and not that we don't know, we know the figures that go to certain institutions, certain ministries. Service is not only about particular ministries and what they dole out. This is ordinary service to the ordinary person. And on top of that, we're dealing with fighting corruption, fighting conflict of interest, educating people, creating prevention at the same time. So what are we doing if we don't resource these bodies?
I mean, I'm just beginning to appreciate the problem. And you're right, SHRAJ is such a key agency. You not only do human rights, administrative justice as well. So you've sent 2 million out for people to work. What sort of, in terms of supervising the agency, how much is that crippling your ability to do your work in real terms? When people come to you, are you able to deliver it on time? Are you able to do your administrative justice role? How exactly is this affecting work across the regions?
Let me just indicate that investigation is about going out and really going to the field to look for evidence, interview people, gather documents, coming to the office only to write a report. If you don't front load the investment into investigation, nobody can go to the field because it takes money to go to the field. It takes resources to buy fuel, put in a vehicle or in a motorbike to go to the field. If that doesn't happen, what we do is do the easy work, which is desk bound. And then when the public is insisting, or we have these cases, charges delaying. Unfortunately, it's not the fault of SHRAJ.
And I must admit, we call you a lot and say, but what happened to that case you said you were investigating?
Perfectly.
We do that all the time.
Perfectly. That is the problem. But if you are a public servant who doesn't want to continually draw attention to yourself because you think government should know and do the needful, and government doesn't do that, there is a problem. But I must quickly indicate that in the past, a year or two ago, we were having releases that were coming.
Okay.
They were coming far between. Our situation has been, why don't you front load it? Because we need the money to go to the field. If you are going to give us money to go to the field to do investigations and gather evidence and educate people and all that, how do we go? We are not like looking for conference facility where you go do the conference and then you pay later. No. The people must be facilitated to go to the field. And that is what governments over the years continue to forget. We are not a normal institution that is only making our business from conference to conference. No.
Are investigators having to dip into their own pocket to do some of the job that they're required to do?
Evans, as if you know, they do. They dip, and when they come and they are, at least they don't even have, they are insisting that, why don't you pay us for what we have used? The commission has not yet even had the money. I don't want it to make it like we are over dramatizing this matter, but it's a reality that we need to address.
I mean, Dr. Drosa, you mentioned that your problem is even bigger because it goes to the legislation, the law that sets you up. You've talked about your accommodation, that it's a challenge, but you have some releases to do the work that you are supposed to do. I wonder, in all this though, when you make representation to the authorities, the finance ministry, about the challenges that you have, I wonder what message do you get? Please unmute for me, Doctor. Please unmute for me.
Once we make the representation to the finance ministry, we get positive feedback. In fact, most of the investigations work we are doing now is supported by the Ministry of Finance. And so to that extent, we get some level of support from the Ministry of Finance. But our main challenge, like I said, has been that of accommodation. And it is Ministry of Finance, together with the EU, that is also supporting the new Internal Audit Service bill. So we receive that support from the Ministry of Finance, except that it is not on the scale that Audit Service or the OSP would get. But our major challenge now as an internal audit agency is our accommodation, because we cannot continue to be in rented premises and we cannot continue to be squatting at GNTC outside the ministry's enclave. And this is an institution that should be seen to be providing advisory services to government and to public institutions. So ordinarily, we should be within the ministry's enclave. But if you go and put internal audit agency at 5th floor GNTC around post office, then it begs the question that what can the internal audit agency do? But I want to believe that once the law is passed, we would have a service, and that service would require a new office. And I'm sure we would also get an office like the OSP. But I must say, if we were to have even 2 floors of the 9th floor OSP building, we would do wonders in this country, because internal auditors across the country are the ones that prevent corruption. And before even external auditors come, the internal auditor would have reviewed the process and then submitted a report. And it is a standard audit practice that no external auditor works without reviewing the work of the internal auditor. And these internal auditors are there with them 24/7. On a quarterly basis, they submit their reports. All these reports come to the internal audit agency. We have over 3,000 public institutions that submit reports on a quarterly basis to the internal audit agency. So in a year, we receive close to 12,000, yes, I think 3,000 times 4. We received about 1,200 reports. And how are we going to manage them? So it's a difficult task. But in all of this, we have been able to hold the fort up to now. You may have heard that as at now, we are even inaugurating audit committees across all the 261 assemblies and 16 regions. All this requires resources, but we are able to do it within the limited resources that we have. That is why I think that the Office of the Special Prosecutor is expected to do more with the resources they have, because they have the accommodation. They have some budget. What is left is for the structures to be put in place. So they can do with what they have. In fact, I'm amazed about the figures you are mentioning, because our budget is not even up to 10 million. Our total budget, compensation and goods and services, is 7.9 million, excluding CAPEX. And out of that, our compensation budget has been coming regularly. Our goods and services, we have the first 2 quarters budget. So we are okay when it comes to those areas. Our challenge, basically, is the accommodation and the others that I mentioned earlier.
I mean, I hear you say that in comparison with the OSP possibly hasn't got enough basis to complain, because if we compare to yours.
I should think so. Most especially, but you see, the OSP is now starting, so maybe the standard they've set for themselves. But I think once you have a structure for yourself, an accommodation, and you have some skeletal staff. At the agency, we are less than 100. In fact, we are being supported by NABCO or officers and national service personnel. The key officers of the agency are less than 50. You see, so we are working through network of internal auditors across the country. That is what may have helped us. But still, I think that with the resources the OSP has now, with the imposing structure at the building that they have, they should be able to do something while they wait for the board to come. I'm very positive that development partners can also come in to support them. That is not to say that government should not support them. But I think that if you compare the resources that government has sunk into OSP with that of IAA and other institutions like SHRAJ, I think OSP is at an advantageous position to fight corruption.
Mary, let me bring you in now. Now we understand the problem, what is happening with the anti-corruption agencies. What's your comment on everything you've heard from the OSP to SHRAJ to the Internal Audit Agency?
Thank you, Evans. Good evening to your viewers. Let me say good evening to the very distinguished panelists for this evening. I am really in good company. Commissioner and Doug, good evening to you. Let me say that listening to these lamentations, I think they are not new. But then the fact remains that it is the reflection of our approach to the fight against corruption as a people. I'm saying so because over the years, we realize that government after government has had the same challenge. We in civil society have advocated, for me, since I joined GII, for resourcing the various anti-corruption and accountability institutions to ensure that they are fighting corruption and not just tackling the symptoms of corruption, but then tackling the root causes and ensuring that we solve the problem of corruption. Unfortunately, government after government has not been committed to this fight. We all know that studies have indicated that, for instance, 3 billion Ghana cedis is lost to corruption on an annual basis. And so if we want to fight corruption and we are giving our anti-corruption institutions less resources to fight, it goes to show that government is not committed to this fight.
But Mary, do you accept?
Capacitated gentlemen speak to the fact that they are giving paltry sums. SHRAJ, for instance, I am aware, are not in more than 100 districts across the country. I don't know if they have set up new ones since they created the regional offices. But then out of 250 something, SHRAJ is not well distributed. Dr. Drosai is talking about his challenges. There are others, Yoko and the rest also have those similar challenges. And so when you hear this, the evidence is so glaring that our approach is a firefighting one that is not sustainable. And if we want to make gains as a country, then we need to begin to ensure that these gentlemen who are committed to this fight are given the resources. And then when they do not show capacity and they do not show the results that we demand, then we can also then ask why they are not making the gains we need to see. We are losing too much to illicit financial flows. We are losing too much to bribery. Our Public Procurement Act is being violated everywhere. And what we get to hear about are just the few snippets of the issues around corruption.
Yeah, but Mary, so, do you accept the explanation that we're a poor country? There are many competing demands on the small amount of money the economy has: water, school, electricity, health, etc. And there's a reason why anti-corruption agencies may not be getting what they require in full to work. Do you accept that?
Evans, I unfortunately, I do not agree to that assertion. Why am I saying so? The president came to power on an anti-corruption campaign. And one of his priorities, let me say, was education. He said he would do free SHS, free compulsory senior high school education for the people of Ghana, because he wants us capacitated, he wants us knowledgeable. He is moving heaven and earth to do this, even though we have had cause to show that this is not sustainable. The president also then says that anti-corruption is what he wants to promote. And if you want to make money, go to the private sector. Unfortunately, the president is not showing that commitment.
But he set up the Office of Special Prosecutor for that.
That is setting up an office, giving the person a big structure, an open structure with nothing in there for the person to operate. It's not an office. Then if you left SHRAG to do its work the way it's constitutionally mandated, why not? So the president says, I will set up an office of the special prosecutor to navigate the challenges around Article 88 and also with the issues around the Attorney General prosecuting his own, which has been statistically proven that it was a challenge. And so if this is done and we have somebody in the office to work, why don't you give him what he wants to do his work? Instead of giving him what he would then be complaining about, and then we cannot also demand accountability from such a person. I hear Dr. Odro say the monies they've been given are at least it's somehow enough for him to start. Unfortunately, this is somebody who is now recruiting. We need to see this man engage his staff. SHRAG has staff. They are not enough. So we are calling for more. The OSP does not have any. Very few people are in his office. We want to see him recruit. And if he is to do that, he needs the resources to do that. We want to see him capacitated enough to do his investigations internally like SHRAG does. We want to see him do his forensic investigations in a lab that he establishes or wherever he gets it from. We want to see that happen because the president says free SHS. He has provided the resources. The president says anti-corruption. Let us see the president resource all the anti-corruption institutions. Because remember, we are losing so much to corruption. And if we are able to seal these gaps with all the anti-corruption agencies performing their various roles, then we would be making so much to resource the other interventions we believe government see as priorities. And then we would also then be saying that, oh yes, we are making gains. Very few people are enjoying the benefits of the lot. And so Ghana is the better for it. Remember that if we make those savings, we can invest it. Ghana is not poor. We are very richly endowed. Our natural resources are going to waste. Tax revenue is being siphoned by a few, enriching very few pockets at the expense of the many. And so when you say we are a poor country, I do not agree to that assessment.
Mr. Whittal, let me put that question to you too. I mean, do you have sympathy for the argument that this is just a general problem with a resource-constrained country? When I talk about resources, I talk about a country that isn't making enough revenue. And so you expect that agencies will struggle and that the anti-corruption agencies and the only agencies not getting all the funding they need. And so within the bigger context of the economy and where we are right now, what you're getting, it should suffice for now.
Unfortunately, Evans, what I know that is happening elsewhere doesn't allow me to accept what you've said. Look at Sierra Leone. It's just coming out of war. The anti-corruption agency of Sierra Leone, if you ask, we were in Kigali. Myself, Kisi Ajabeng, and Mami Yatiwa were in, about 3 weeks ago, we were in Kigali. What the Sierra Leone anti-corruption agency indicated in terms of what is being supported by government to perform makes all of us, even though Kisi Ajabeng's legal framework draft almost everybody at that conference. They all said, look, Ghana has got it. We've got the law, we've got the right persons, we've got everything to fight corruption. But we know internally that Kisi is not being properly resourced. For me, sitting with about 1,000 plus staff, I feel a bit more comfortable. Forget that I'm not getting so much in terms of goods and service. That some few millions added to my budget will resolve my problem. But Kisii needs foundational issues to be resolved. He needs recruitment. He needs to retrofit that building, which we all know. It looks glamorous from outside, but you need to go inside. It is not fit for the purpose for which he needs it. I am more comfortable with an old parliament in terms of what I have come to meet. And to be honest with you, government has put up a magnificent four-story, it's in the process anyway, four-story building to add to the old parliament based on what was bent. So all is well. What I need is goods and service. If you are giving me 50 million last year and you can give me 30, 40, look, I'll put my people to use in such a way that I can justify why we have been established. But if you pay so much to staff, but what they need to work with is practically not there, we are causing a problem. And that is what the message I want to send to government.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Drosai, so Mary laid the picture for us that since she got into Ghana Integrity Initiative, they've consistently been campaigning for government to resource anti-corruption agencies. And as we've seen, there's always a complaint that has not been done. And there must be a reason for this, is it simply down to governments over the past now and in the past not being committed to the cause? Or could it be something more closer to the fact that because of the poor nature of this country, with all the competing needs that we have, of course, and we are sharing the resources, these other agencies like yourself will unfortunately suffer. And if you speak to the other agencies, they'll all tell you they have the similar problem. Isn't that possibly why the problem has persisted for so long since this Fourth Republican Constitution hasn't been solved?
I don't think so. I don't think we're a poor country, and I don't think we are suffering because of the poverty level in this country. I think we are a rich country. Like Mary said, if you are to do a computation of how much we lose as a country on a daily basis, you will realize that we have a lot of money here, and that should be enough basis to justify the adequate resourcing of state institutions. The Internal Audit Agency alone, the amount of money we are able to save this country, even if government is to give us 5% of that as our goods and services or our CAPEX, it will not be bad. So I think it is not an issue of poverty. It's an issue of our inability to connect the savings these anti-corruption institutions make to the country as against the support that they need to enable them to continue to make the savings. And I think it is about time government puts value to the savings that we make, because Shraj is doing a lot of wonderful work there. IA is doing a lot of wonderful work. Ghana Audit Service, same. So if we are able to quantify these savings, government should be able to resource us as needed. There is nothing like the country is poor, we have competing needs. Even if we have competing needs, one of the important needs of a country should be our fight against corruption, save money, and then use this money into other areas that will facilitate development. So I think it should be a priority for us as a country to be able to resource these institutions. The reason is that if we resource them well, we'll save the country a lot of money, and that money can go into financing other development activities. If we fail to resource anti-corruption institutions, at the end of it all, Ghana is going to lose, because millions will be going into individual pockets. Communal wealth or societal wealth will be reduced into unit level wealth or individual wealth. And that is also a dangerous precedent for democracy. So I think that I'll add my voice to what my two other panelists have said. We should resource all anti-corruption institutions well, connect their savings to the resourcing, and then make sure that at least at all times we are able to give them what they need. Because if we want to see our democracy working, a lot depends on anti-corruption institutions.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the budgetary challenges, Mr. Witta, I want to bring you in on this. There's also the the structural functional issues for the OSP, for example. We were talking about lack of a board, for example, for it since Kisho Jabin was sworn in. I noticed, Mr. Whittal, that your agency, SHRAD, you're supposed to have a representation on the OSP board. I understand. SHRAD, you already have your board in place. Do you even require a board under the law?
No, we don't need to. Myself and my two deputies are our own board.
Okay, okay, great. So if you look at the OSP and the way it's been set up, how much does it take away from his functions without a board? And I noticed, I asked you this because I noticed that in the law, SHRAD is supposed to have a representation on the OSP board. I mean, can it be fatal to its ability to actually do its job?
Look, Evans, I just want to be very straight on this. It's fatal. There's no reason why the board is not sworn in. There's no reason. We submitted the names long ago. We were requested to submit those names as far back as March or thereabouts, or even earlier.
March this year?
Yeah. No, I'm talking of even earlier.
Okay.
So we have submitted the names. Whatever checks they want to do, whatever they want to do, they need to have done that, because the OSP needs a board to give him direction. He needs the board to determine the type of recruitment he can make at the strategic level. He needs a board to set in motion certain strategic directions in terms of code of conduct and all that. So we appreciate that, and we quickly responded to the letter from the OSP at the direction of the Chief of Staff that they want this to be done very urgent. In fact, we were given a week within which to submit the names, and I know I did that. Why we have kept that board from operating up to now, I don't understand.
It's been close to a year. I mean, from everything I've seen.
Yes, I'm really at a loss.
You haven't been told why that possibly is the case?
No, and I don't want to interfere. I'm to supply a board member. I will do that, but I don't want to go into the inner workings of another anti-corruption agency. It's not fair.
And you say without the board, OSP's functions will be affected gravely.
Very much. No doubt about that.
Okay.
I can tell you that because the commission has always supplied somebody to that board.
Yeah.
And I know what that person does at the board, because when he comes, he owes it to us as a commission to let us know what they have been asked to perform as an anti-corruption agency. Not that they'll go into the details of what they have done there. No. But the core issues. And I know that OSP right now, because the previous OSP did not really do major recruitment, it falls on him to now do those critical recruitments. And the board is needed to do that. In fact, he cannot recruit without a board. So what happens? What happens?
Okay, so that is a fascinating fact indeed. Mary, I know civil society also has a representation, and your boss was a representation until the board was dissolved recently. I don't know if they've reached out to civil society too, and I noticed that in the law they specifically mentioned a woman. Have civil society also been asked to present somebody?
Yes, most definitely. Civil society on its own as well did some engagements and consultations within, and I am very sure that list was submitted. Apart from being submitted, I also am aware that the totality of the list that is required to constitute the board has been submitted to the office of the president, just like Commissioner has indicated. And I believe that has been more than 3 months now. And so it's mind-boggling to think about what exactly it is they are doing from the Chief of Staff's office to the President himself, and why they have not as yet sworn in the board to perform the serious task Commissioner has just spelled out per the mandate of the board in the OSP Act 959. I believe, and for us, sometimes you then begin to wonder, is it the case that some of these impediments are put in the way to thwart the work of the person who has been appointed? Is it the fact that we have been able to set up an office, we created a legislation, and so we've ticked the box, so whatever is left is not our problem, and for that matter, we won't do much? Because if we want to fight corruption, we must be seen to be manifestly doing so. And for a president who has touted himself as a person of integrity, a person who respects the rule of law, we believe that in this case he has missed a step, a serious one. And we need to see some action, because he doesn't have to do anything. And just like Commissioner said, perhaps maybe you could perhaps be interrogating the persons they have submitted, but it is not within your purview to select from the institutions. These are independent institutions working on anti-corruption. You said they should bring a certain caliber of staff, and that person has been sent. What is keeping the president from swearing these people in? Is for us to perhaps maybe ask the president directly, because you cannot just fathom what is happening. Is it the fact that we just setting up the office to frustrate the gentleman to also resign? Or we are not just interested in fighting corruption? Some of us, we need to perhaps ask the president himself. Perhaps you are the media person, you can schedule a meeting to ask. But for us in civil society, we believe that is not a good sign. And for the president, he needs to leave some good signs. In the past year, we have had too many causes to speak to certain things that have not gone well in Public Procurement, Public Financial Management Act. And so if we see an office that is supposed to help us to fight some of these infractions being derailed, then we believe that perhaps the economy of corruption is what is going on.
Yeah. I mean, Mariada, thank you very much. Mr. Whittal, thank you very much. Dr. Odrosa, I am grateful. This is something that we'll definitely follow up on some of the key issues. Tomorrow, we'll get into the OSP issues with the board and the questions that we all heard from Dr. Odrosa, from Shraj, about the funding. Really, what is happening? We'll get into that tomorrow if you join us on all our platforms, both on radio and here on the Joy News channel. Enjoy the rest of your evening.